The producers of TNG said, let's start Season 3 off right, with a Wesley episode. This is a review of the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Evolution. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know what not to do if nanites ever infect your computer, be warned. Spoilers beyond this point. It's the 24th century. Shouldn't there be, like, a version of malware bytes that scans for nanites? I'm getting ahead of myself. First things first. Wesley has overslept and is late for his duty shift. Oh, that Wesley. Riker calls him and tells him to get his ass to work. Wesley notices a particular container at the desk with a loose lid, so he puts the lid on tight and then rushes out. I'm sure that's fine, nothing to worry about. Captain Picard tells us through a log entry that the Enterprise has come to a binary star system on a scientific research mission. Their guest, a big-shot scientist named Paul Stubs, is preparing to carry out an experiment to observe neutronium decay at relativistic blah blah blah. It's a science thing, and it can only be done when there's an explosion in this binary star system, which happens once every 196 years. So if they miss their chance this time, they won't get another one. Dr. Stubs is on the bridge observing the binary stars on the view screen, waxing poetic about the stellar clockwork of the two stars and how 20 years of his life have gone into preparing for this moment. The scientific device Stubs has created to measure the neutronium whatchamacallits is in the shuttle bay and is about to be launched when the Enterprise suddenly lurches forward. The crew loses control of the ship, and they're headed straight for the trail of stellar matter that runs between the two stars, and then, just as suddenly, everything's okay. Control is reestablished. Stubs took a bump when the ship shook, so he goes to sickbay, where Dr. Crusher is back. Hey! This is the first episode of Season 3, remember, so it's Beverly's big return to the show, after being absent for all of Season 2. Wesley is here too, and Stubs says something about how he sure would hate it if he was stuck on a starship with his mother. Wesley's like, ha ha ha, can't relate. Stubs and Wesley leave, and Beverly notices that the replicator has made itself a Tom Collins. She's like, when I said I felt like something long and stiff, this ain't what I had in mind. In all seriousness, the replicator keeps filling the glass with liquid until it overflows, which might indicate a problem. I don't know. I'm not an engineer. Beverly goes and talks to Picard about Wesley. She's been away for a year. She and Wes haven't seen each other, so she's like, tell me about him, Jean-Luc. Picard's like, oh, sure, he's, which one is Wesley? Is he the Irish one who never leaves the transporter room? Picard assures Beverly that Wesley is fine, he works hard, and he's becoming an excellent officer. Beverly's like, yeah, but is he getting into trouble? Is he doing drugs, getting laid? Is he cool? I always wanted my kid to be cool. His grades are good? Wesley and Stubs are in the shuttle bay examining his space probe. Stubs shares with Wesley that he, too, knows the burden of being a child prodigy. He was one also. You'll never face a greater adversary than your own potential, Stubs says. So good luck with that. The Enterprise goes to red alert when Worf detects an approaching Borg ship. But then, the Borg ship is gone. Then the doors start opening and closing over and over again, and the shields go down, and the engines go offline, and the computer starts reciting chess moves. Picard's like, staff meeting, let's go. Stubs invites himself to the meeting too and says, hey, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. The priority here isn't the safety of the ship and the lives of everyone on board, but the success of my science experiment, right? Picard's like, no. Stubs is like, oh, well, I'd rather die than abandon my work, so that's my vote. I'm just going to go somewhere and chill out. I'm good. Later. And he leaves. Counselor Troy turns to Picard like, his nonchalant attitude is just an act. Picard's like, no. Troy's right, though. There's something a little off about this Stubs guy. I can't quite put my finger on it. Wesley is helping Geordi examine the computer to find out what's been causing all these malfunctions lately, and he notices something troubling. So he goes back to his lab, where we saw him sleeping at the beginning of the episode, and he opens that container that had the loose lid when he woke up and looks inside, and whatever it is, it's not good. Cut to Wesley and 10 Forward placing traps along the base of the wall. Guinan walks up like, you're wasting your time. We don't have roaches. I put roach poison in all the food. Wesley shares his concerns with Guinan. See, he was working on this school project, a project about nanites, machines small enough to enter living cells. They're used for medical applications, but Wesley had the idea of programming two of them to work together in tandem. The results were promising, but then he fell asleep and the two nanites he was working with escaped from their jar. Wesley says, I'm probably worried about nothing. My nanites couldn't be responsible for what's happening on the ship. It's just a science project. Guinan says, I used to know a doctor who told me the same thing once. His name was Frankenstein. Good guy. A little intense, but great sense of humor. Every time his dick got hard, he'd scream, It's alive! Made me laugh every time. The crew continues to try and figure out what's wrong with the ship. At one point, Stars and Stripes Forever starts blasting out of all the speakers, and Picard's like, just unplug the bridge. Down in the shuttle bay, Stubs is talking with Wesley and sounding pretty fatalistic about the prospects for his experiment. He says it would have been one thing to fail, but to not even get up to bat. That's it. Intelligent but socially inept, hyper-focused on something that nobody else gives a shit about, isolated and resentful with a generally off-putting presence. Stubs is a baseball fan! I can't believe I didn't pick up on it right away. We can always smell our own. Stubs shares his love of baseball with Wesley, saying even though it was abandoned on Earth centuries ago, I have seen the great players make the great plays. Wesley's like, you watch old games on the holodeck? And Stubbs says, holodeck? No, I'm a way bigger loser than that. I read the box scores and imagine the game in my mind. You could too, Wesley, if you apply yourself and you want to avoid your mother bad enough. Speaking of which, a bit later, Beverly walks in on Wesley, checking his nanite traps, and after they have a mini argument where Beverly's like, you work too hard, go get drunk and catch an STD. And Wesley's like, you've been gone for a year. You don't know me. You don't know nothing about me. Wesley tells Beverly about the nanites. Then they tell everybody else about the nanites and the situation becomes clear. The nanites are self-replicating. So the two that escaped from Wesley's lab have now multiplied. There are billions of them infecting the computer core, eating memory crystal for fuel. And the nanites are evolving, each new generation more sophisticated than the last. Stubbs is like, great, let's kill them like we would any other invasive pest. Picard's like, no, we don't do that. This is Star Trek The Next Generation. So before we exterminate them, we need to see if they're a form of intelligence that we can communicate with. In the meantime, we'll try and move them safely out of our computer. A bit later, Data, Geordi, and Wesley are in the computer core working on ways of slowing down the nanites when Stubbs walks in and says, have you tried zapping them with high-level gamma radiation? Data's like, that would kill them. Or worse yet, make them angry. You wouldn't like them when they're angry. Stubbs is like, let's just see. And he zaps them with gamma radiation from his handy-dandy Ronco pocket gamma ray gun. On the bridge, the lights go out and poison gas is released from the vents. Riker manages to shut off the gas before anyone dies. Worf and Data arrive with Stubbs, and Data tells Picard that Stubbs just killed a bunch of the nanites. Picard is not happy, but Stubbs says, these are just little machines with loose screws. Kill the rest of them so we can get on with my experiment, man. Am I the only person here who cares about observing the relativistic neutronium whatever? Data points out that the nanites immediately retaliated for Stubbs killing a bunch of them by releasing poison gas and trying to kill the crew. That right there suggests a degree of intelligence. While Data works on adapting the universal translator to allow them to talk to the nanites attack Stubbs, zapping him with lightning from the replicator while he's in his quarters imagining Bobby Thompson about to hit the shot heard round the world. I guess he got a shock felt up his ass instead, huh? Stubbs survives, but the attack convinces Picard, regretfully, that the time has come to eradicate the nanites from the computer core. The ship is at risk, there's really no choice. But right before Worf is about to push the button to zap all the nanites, Data has a breakthrough. He can communicate with the nanites. In order to broker a peace between the nanites and the crew, Data volunteers to allow the nanites to take control of his body so the two sides can talk face to face. Picard's like, sure, why the hell not? Everybody moves to the computer core. The nanites crawl in through the pores of Data's hand, and now Data is basically a mecha for the nanites. The nanites, through data, explained that they meant no harm, they were just exploring, and they needed the computer memory crystals to fuel their reproduction. Stubs steps up and takes responsibility for attacking the nanites. He says that he regrets his actions and places himself at the mercy of the nanites. The nanites are like, okay, we forgive you. We've outgrown this place anyway. Can we get out of here? So Picard agrees to relocate the nanites to a planet of their very own, and in exchange, the nanites help to repair the computer in time for Stubs to launch his space probe and do his experiment. Yay! Look at all those neutroniums doing their things they do, which are of great scientific interest, no doubt. Beverly is in 10 forward chatting with Guinan. She's like, kids, am I right? As they're talking, Wesley enters with a young lady on his arm. Beverly says, oh, hey, check it out. He's cool after all. Wesley's got a girlfriend. That's great. I'm so happy. What a relief to see him out having fun like a normal teenager. Who the fuck is this girl? This is a significant episode in the run of TNG for several reasons. Gates McFadden is back as Dr. Beverly Crusher. There's a new opening credit sequence, new Starfleet uniforms. Well, except for you, Wesley. And most importantly, this is the first episode written by Michael Piller, who went on to become arguably the single most consequential writer of this era of Star Trek, eventually serving as showrunner for TNG, co-creator and original showrunner for both Deep Space Nine and Voyager, as well as writing the movie Star Trek Insurrection. I wouldn't say Evolution is Piller's best contribution to Star Trek, but it does make for an impressive debut in a few ways. Maybe the most impressive thing about it, especially when considered in context with the rest of the series, is that it's a Wesley episode. I joked about that at the start of this video, but this is a really good Wesley episode. One of the best Wesley episodes the show ever did. I've defended Wesley in the past, but there's no denying that the writers failed to make the most of his character during his time on the show. Evolution is an exception. It's one of the few Wesley-centric episodes to actually take Wesley and the pressures he experiences as a member of the Enterprise crew seriously. Wesley is supposed to be the boy wonder of the ship. As Dr. Stubs says in one of their scenes together, he is a wunderkind. But what does that mean to Wesley? His job as an acting officer on the crew and his academic studies seem to take up all of his time. He spends much of this episode seeming exhausted. That's why the nanites are able to escape and wreak havoc on the ship to begin with. Yes, Wesley carelessly leaves the nanite jar open overnight, but not because he's a reckless person, because he couldn't keep his eyes open any longer, and he fell asleep at his workbench. One of the reasons Wesley was so disliked by much of TNG's audience is because most of the time he comes across as either an annoying know-it-all or a too naive to be true blank slate who's only there so that the older characters can teach him an important lesson. Evolution presents a more realistic and sympathetic version of the character, a gifted young person from whom great things are expected, who is working himself to the breaking point to live up to that potential and to not let anyone down. That can only go on so long before it leads to disaster. And even if it doesn't lead to disaster, it can still take you somewhere you might not want to go. Enter Dr. Stubs. This isn't just a Wesley episode, it's also a Dr. Stubs episode, but that only makes it more of a Wesley episode, because Dr. Stubs is there to provide Wesley with a glimpse into his own future. And that future is, well, it might not be great. Not that Stubs seems to have a bad life exactly. He's a respected scientist on the brink of a great breakthrough, but he spent so much of his life working to fulfill that potential he showed as a young person that if he fails to fulfill it now, he won't have anything left. He says at one point that he would rather die than abandon his experiment, and Counselor Troy's empathic sense confirms that he means it. Living up to the promise of his genius isn't just important to Stubs, it's the only thing he has to live for. In some ways, he's reminiscent of the character of Dr. Daystrom from the last episode I reviewed, Classic Trek's The Ultimate Computer. Both men are dedicated to their work with such single-minded determination that they're willing to sacrifice the lives of others and even their own lives to see it through. That's the life that Stubs sees ahead for Wesley. During one of their talks, he tells Wesley, "Now the burden is yours. However, at the end of the episode, Wesley seems to be trying to avoid that destiny. He's learned his lesson and decided to make time for some things other than work and school. Wil Wheaton does some of his best work as Wesley in this one, probably because he actually gets a character to play. Wesley's story takes him through a bit of an emotional roller coaster ride, and Wheaton lets us see his exhaustion and scrambling to keep up with his responsibilities, his mounting dread as he begins to suspect his nanites are responsible for the problems on the ship, his resentment toward his mom, which has two sides. He's mad at her for leaving, and he's mad at her for coming back and crowding him. It's a lot, and Wheaton handles it well. As Dr. Stubs, Ken Jenkins turns in a good performance too. Stubs is a tricky character. In certain ways, he's the villain of the piece. He doesn't cause the problem, but his disregard for everything other than his own interests makes the problem worse. And yet, despite his selfishness and impatience and tunnel vision, when he compares the nanite infestation to a pest control problem and suggests that they be exterminated, he's not being as unreasonable as he sounds. I mean, sure, it's ultimately shown that he's wrong about the nanites. They are intelligent, and the Enterprise crew is doing the right thing by trying to communicate with them rather than just wiping them out. But at the time, Stubbs' suggestion to just get rid of the nanites, as incurious and self-interested as it may be, is totally valid. His experiment, whatever it is repeatedly emphasized as being this super important thing. And if they don't do it now, it can't be done for another 200 years. Given what they know when he says it, he's not completely off base. Speaking of baseball, Michael Piller is responsible for making that a thing in Star Trek as well. Another reason why I'm grateful for his role in the franchise. Piller was a baseball fan, and when he co-created Deep Space Nine, he made lead protagonist Ben Sisko a baseball fan too. And there are a ton of baseball references throughout that series. There's not as much baseball stuff in TNG, almost none outside of this episode, in fact, but the best scene in Evolution for Ken Jennings as Stubbs is all about baseball. Stubbs has just told Wesley about his sad habit of reliving old games in his mind through his knowledge of statistics. Then he expresses his own apparently doomed ambitions in the language of the poetic baseball nerd.
Call your shot. Point to a star. One great blast and the crowd rises.
A brand new era in astrophysics, postponed 196 years on account of rain. In his excellent book, Fade In, which was never published, but which you can find on the internet and which I highly recommend reading, Michael Piller credits that monologue with getting him the job as a writer for TNG. Well, no shit, I'd have hired him too. Beyond Wesley and Stubbs, the episode also reintroduces Beverly to the regular cast in a way that both feels effortless and also acknowledges the effect that her absence had on the rest of the crew, particularly Wesley. The tension between Wesley and Beverly isn't the main point of the episode, but it's there, and that feels right. Sure, Wesley is almost a grown-up by this point, but even so, his mother, the only parent he has, his father being dead, left him on the ship while she went off to do something else. And Wesley was fine. He didn't seem to suffer for her absence, but still, she did leave him behind. And that should mean something. From her point of view, Beverly is concerned with everything she missed in the year she was gone. To others, like Stubbs, she plays it off as no big deal. Ha ha, he was 2 inches shorter when I left, and so forth. But in private, to a trusted friend like Captain Picard or Guinan, Beverly makes it clear that she's taking it a little harder than she lets on. Her feelings toward Wesley are as complicated as his are toward her. She's worried that he's too focused on work and duty, but she's also hurt that he doesn't seem to need her as much as he used to. In other words, the script treats the characters like real people with feelings. The sort of feelings any one of us might have if we were in the same situation. It's not the focus of the episode, it's not what everything is about, but it's there, and it's important, because if we don't view these characters as real people, and we don't care about how they feel and what happens to them, there's no point to any of this. There's solid character work throughout, and the dilemma is solved in true TNG fashion, not by destroying the enemy, but by reaching out in the hope of understanding them. It's all very well done. My only significant complaint about the script, which Piller wrote from a story by himself and Michael Wagner, is how abruptly the conflict with the nanites is resolved. The nanites inhabit Data, explain that they didn't mean any harm. Stubs apologizes for killing a bunch of them. They agree to make peace, and then the very next scene is Picard explaining through voiceover that everything's good. The nanites are going to get their own planet, and Dr. Stubs will get to carry out his experiment. We see Stubs doing just that, and then we get the epilogue with Beverly and Guinan in 10 Forward. It all happens really fast. The episode is very well paced up to that point, and then breaks into a sprint heading into the conclusion, as though Piller spent so much time on characterization and then panicked when he realized he only had a couple of pages left to wrap everything up. In terms of how it treats the rogue AI at the center of the dilemma, Evolution takes a similar approach to the episodes of Star Trek the original series that I've reviewed previously in this batch. Like Nomad in The Changeling and the M5 in The Ultimate Computer, the nanites are not evil. They don't realize they're doing anything wrong or harmful. The damage they're causing to the Enterprise is merely the byproduct of them following their programming. The difference is, Nomad and the M5 have already evolved by the time we meet them. They realize they're hurting people by doing what they do, they just don't care. They have other priorities. The nanites are only just gaining that level of awareness at the end of this episode. They are destructive, yes, but innocent. Unlike Captain Kirk, whose go-to move with a dangerous computer is to talk it into destroying itself, Captain Picard demonstrates understanding and compassion and offers the nanites peace and freedom instead of destruction. I'm not saying Captain Kirk had the option to offer peace and freedom to Nomad or the M5. He didn't, given the circumstances of those episodes, but the fact that Picard does have that option and takes it demonstrates one of the most obvious distinctions between the original Star Trek and the Next Generation. Nomad and the M5 were the results of human intellect being warped and corrupted, logic severed from emotion and morality. With the nanites, it's less about what created them and more about how our heroes respond to them, and what that response tells us about the kind of people our heroes are. Evolution is directed by the prolific and reliable Winrick Colby, who does typically solid work here. He makes particularly effective use of long takes and long shots throughout the episode. I enjoy the way he shoots the end of this scene between Stubbs and Troy, where Stubbs gets up and walks to the door in the background of the shot while the camera remains at his desk. Then, once Troy leaves, he walks back to the desk and sits down. The framing of the shot and the staging of the scene reinforcing that while Troy may be concerned with his emotional well-being, it's his work that matters the most to Stubbs, and his work that he is always drawn back to. Conventional wisdom says that Season 3 is when TNG finally gets good. I dispute that. I think Season 2 has more than a few excellent episodes and is overall a lot better than it generally gets credit for, but Season 3 is undoubtedly a watershed year for the show. The year when it settles in and becomes the show most of us know and love and remember. There's a new confidence and a stronger sense of identity that will define the series from this point forward and lead it to greater heights of creativity and popularity. It's obvious watching this episode that it's not only the nanites that have evolved. Those are my thoughts on Evolution. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next time as I continue with this batch of reviews of episodes in which AI goes awry. Up next, we're jumping over to Star Trek Voyager for a look at an episode from Season 2 of that show titled Prototype. See you next time for that one. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.